Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the editor of the Times Literary Supplement, Stig Abell, and the Telegraph's Brexit editor, Diya Chakravarti. Welcome. Good to see you down here at Westminster again on another busy evening. So to the front pages then, let's start. Ultimately fruitless evening, as we will see from the front pages. There we are. The Guardian says there will be crisis talks in number 10 after MPs tonight rejected all 4 alternative options to break the Brexit deadlock. Much like The Guardian, the Metro pictures the semi-naked protesters who managed to find their way into the Commons chamber today. The Times also leading on today's Brexit news, calling it a boost for Theresa May. The Mirror's headline keeps it simple: MPs choose nothing. While the Telegraph suggests the stalemate could lead to another general election. The Eye simply calls MPs April Fools. While the Daily Mail says it's back to square one as it calls tonight's Brexit votes a farce. And the Express tells MPs, we voted for Brexit, all you say is no. Away from Brexit, the FT reports that the oil company Saudi Aramco has disclosed its financial performance for the first time in 75 years. The Sun has word of some Mick Jagger's health problems with the pun, let's mend the night together. Sing along now, obviously. And the Star relays word from Pope Francis that footballer Lionel Messi is not, in fact, God. Does that need saying out loud? Anyway, apparently it does.
That splash is no more or less full of sense than everything on Brexit. I mean, they might as well say that.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
So, to the nonsensical Brexit headlines
we all know what things aren't. That's the great theme of today. We know that Messi isn't God, and we know that Parliament don't know what to do with Brexit. And that's the problem. It's very easy to point to things that are not, rather than to point to things that may well be.
Which is why the Eye calls parliamentarians April Fools.
And I don't quite know, because I think you could make an argument that parliamentarians, this is me being very charitable here, are trying their best. They're kind of locked into this insanity that is the Brexit process, and they don't know what to do with it, so they're trying their best. Oliver Letwin, who's never had a good idea if he could possibly help it, has yet again produced another one which sounds theoretically clever in a wonkish world with no meaning, but actually in practice has evaporated before him, because if you put a bunch of amendments to Parliament and no one likes them, what do you end up with?
You came close to liking them tonight.
Oh, great. Well, let's come close to having a resolution and come close to settling the fate of this nation and come close to moving on with our collective lives. But a miss is as good as a mile in that respect, Anna. We haven't progressed, we haven't moved forward, and we're still as deadlocked as ever. But maybe they're trying, Parliament. They are trying, it seems to me, but they are being presented with the impossible situation of a poorly planned referendum, promises that were never deliverable, never defined, let alone thought about being delivered. And if you ask a binary question, which doesn't have a binary answer, this is where you get to. Parliament is struggling, but Brexit has beaten Parliament, it has beaten the whip system, it has beaten two-party politics, and at the moment, it is destroying the very foundations of our democracy. I don't want to overstate that, but at the minute, the democratic system that we have in this country that we kind of invented doesn't work.
So let's go to your paper then, Diya, the Daily Telegraph. Theresa May, they say, threatening an election as MPs hit stalemate. Would an election solve any of these issues, do you think?
I think that it has some chance of solving it. I know Stig really disagrees with that one. And I totally see Stig's point as well. But I do think that on where a lot of these people who actually did fight the 2017 election on a certain manifesto, they kind of moved away from that. And I think it's now time for them to be actually honest about what they actually feel about Brexit and where they stand on it. If we are going to have another election, it actually forces all these parties to actually focus their minds. I mean, if you remember, the Lib Dems were the only people who were actually honest about their intention on how they were going to treat the 2016 referendum, and they got a pretty bad hammering. I think because the SNP too, perhaps, because a lot of people clearly believed Labour and the Conservative prospective MPs when they said that they were not going to revoke it.
Then in the halcyon days when Brexit it meant Brexit. Now what does Brexit mean
Brexit never-
to each individual Conservative? I'm picking one party, the Conservatives, for example.
It's the same as for Labour.
How do they come together
Well,
to
that's-
even write a manifesto?
But surely that's what they need to decide. If they want to
But they
govern
can't decide
us,
that. That was quite
if
clear
they want
tonight
to
that they
govern
couldn't.
us, and they say that we should vote for them in droves in order to put them there, pay their salaries, and make them come to a decision in order to implement a choice that we were allowed in 2016 to make, then they do have to make their minds up. They do have to tell us what their...
But you know,
what they-
but Theresa May, if she was in charge of the manifesto, would say it was her withdrawal agreement, which has not been supported by Parliament.
So will she have enough people supporting it within her own party to put it to the public as part of their manifesto? That's what surely needs to be decided.
It's an interesting point, though, because is the general election just a crypto way of having another referendum? And if it is that, why not just have another referendum? If we believe that the general election is a way of saying to the people, Brexit is very complicated. It wasn't complicated when a lot of us on both sides lied to you 3 years ago, but it's become more complicated. So here is a variety of options. Labour will have one, Tories have the other. If we believe that it needs to go back to the people to clear this mess up, why don't we just have another referendum?
I think for a couple of reasons. One being, what is the question going to be? And I think you raised it last time, actually. You were saying, what exactly is the question going to be? And despite, what a lot of people would have you believe, a lot of us Brexit voters haven't quite died over the last 3 years. Why should we believe that this time, when we vote again, if we haven't changed our minds, those times we haven't changed our minds, if we voted again for Brexit, why should we believe anybody in thinking that this time it's going to be implemented? I mean, what is the message going to be there? Maybe there is an answer to that question. I don't have it. I haven't heard it.
But if we're still in, you may find that the proxy referendum becomes the European elections, which is irony of
That's
irony.
a very good point. Yeah.
But we're in the realm, aren't we, of the least worst options. I mean, that's, again, one of the compelling ironies of Brexit, which is all sudden uplands at one point. But we are kind of having to grapple with what's the least bad option. We still got to respect the fact that there was a referendum, there was a concrete result. It wasn't a absolute majority of people who could vote. It's 37% of the electorate. There was no threshold inexplicably built into that. So we were making a gigantic constitutional change with no prospect of getting a really strong majority to do it. What is that a recipe for? Confusion and debate, which we're still seeing played out now. So the question is, Theresa May's got her cabinet tomorrow, 5 hours of the same tired people looking each other, I imagine, with utter desperation and insanity in their eyes as they stare around that table saying, well, we've not come up with anything in the last 2.5 years. Is there something in the last 24 hours? Probably not, but she has the option. What is the least bad thing
Yeah, but
that could get
they are
agreement?
split down the middle, so how they agree is also part of the difficulty. If you look at the results today, the idea of a customs union, the Ken Clarke idea, lost by 3, Norway-style option, lost by 21, a second referendum being put to the people, lost only by 12 now.
Got its
There's
highest
3
vote.
things still in the ring, and yet the Times still says that MPs' rejection of all those plans today is actually a boost for Theresa May and the prospect of bringing back her withdrawal agreement.
Sometimes when things are so bad, anything is a boost. I mean, Theresa May's political position is so beneath the waterline, it's almost unimaginable. So this is a boost in the sense of if one of these options had gained a clear parliamentary majority, her vision, such as it is of Brexit, would have been dismissed by Parliament. That has not happened. So she's still alive to fight another day, isn't she? But whether she can produce anything tomorrow, I can't see what that could possibly be. You could make a case for her deal with a confirmatory vote, which seems to combine the two things, but you still have Dia's point, which is that's just rerunning the referendum. And all the MPs, a vast majority of whom voted to trigger Article 50, a vast majority of whom campaigned to respect the referendum result in 2017, are they all going to go against that?
OK, so let's take a look at the Mirror, again reiterating the fact that we know that MPs have voted for nothing. You've talked about a general election, you've talked about a second referendum. Some people, commentators like Ian Dale, for example, long supporter of Brexit, has started to talk about delaying all of this for 2 years. Is that also a possibility now?
My worry about that particular option is that it doesn't do anything for certainty. There are people's lives, the people who are waiting to hear what their future is going to bring. There are businesses who are waiting to hear, to make investment decisions and choices. It does nothing to allay those fears about that come with this sort of uncertainty. My other question with that option would be, there is another side to this negotiation, the EU. What is it in in for the EU to agree for us to have a long extension if they can't see a decision at the end of it. So, for example, if we'd said we actually have decided on one of the 4 options which were presented to the Parliament today, but we haven't quite have the legislative time needed in order to put this, to make this part of our law, then the EU might have been able to reasonably say, well, OK, so we'll give you 2 years while you sort this out, but we know where we're headed. Now, the EU is going to think, what exactly are we going to give you more time for while you just sit there and dither, and none of you can actually make a decision?
And what changes in 2 years? What seismic event is going to take place? One of the fascinating things about the polls, they've moved a bit. They've arguably, if you believe the majority of them, they've moved towards Remain, but not in any great decisive way. We're still in the realm of 55-45. We're still in the realm of 50-50, effectively. And that doesn't lead to decision-making. So what will happen in 2 years? I mean, the delay would mean we don't get the cliff edge, we don't get the no-deal problems, so it's pushed down the road. But have we not seen for 2.5 years the danger of can-kicking politics, which is, please, for God's sake, don't get to the end of this process because we have no clue what the end is. If we do that for another 2 years, does that really give us anything other than a deserved reputation for utter incompetence and a lack of statesmanship? And that seems to me to be the undeniable fact. Whether we blame parliamentarians or blame a gentleman sitting in his shed at the minute, I hope, with his head in his hands for catapulting this country into this mess. This was a decision taken 3 years ago that has led directly to where we are now. What changes?
You're talking about Cameron in the Shepherd's Hut.
I'm talking about David Cameron,
Right, okay.
and the decision to have this referendum with no plans, so he was punting it.
Yeah.
He believed that we would vote Remain, and he had no idea what would happen if we voted Leave, and we still don't know.
I thought he was
3
talking
years
to
on.
all men in sheds out there. So I was
love a
going
shed.
to say,
No, I know.
just get indoors, it's cold.
Not all men in sheds. Not all men in
Amen.
sheds. Yeah.
Back with more of the papers, back to square one is how the Mail describes it. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me this evening, even Stig Abel and Dia Chakravarti. Welcome back to both of you. More of the papers obviously leading on Brexit, for example. The Daily Mail saying we're back to square one. Is that actually true, or are we beginning to hone down? She said, you're laughing already. Are we beginning to hone down more of what Parliament would accept?
No, because Parliament has, on now 2 occasions, refused to say what it would accept. It's getting close in the sense of the votes shifting a little bit, but the stuff that's on the table is stuff that's being debated for 2 or 3 years, technically.
Yeah.
Norway, the great compromise option that keeps us effectively in the single market and a customs union, so we get some of the benefits of the EU, but without actually being in it. It was a great it's a very British muddled compromise, and maybe that will succeed. But that's been on the table for a very long time. The customs union has been knocking around for a long time. All of these options aren't new. And this is the fear for Theresa May, I kind of think, is tomorrow as they sit in cabinet, all the options are there. Is there one that she'll go for? And there doesn't seem to be any suggestion that's
And
the case.
Philip Hammond, we're hearing, the Chancellor, is likely to say that the government has to make its own compromise or admit that Parliament has failed and therefore put it back to the people. So beginning to hint that actually a second referendum might be a way out of this for everybody. As we know, the Cabinet is entirely split on this, don't we?
And there's no way, do you think there's no way the Tories would, from Cabinet down, back a second referendum?
Who knows? I mean, I genuinely cannot speak for them. I have no idea what they're actually going to decide. But it just seems extraordinary that having given it to the people to make a decision, because they all did vote to give us a referendum as well. This is also true. I mean, I know Cameron gets a lot of blame for that, and I think he deserves some of that, absolutely. But they all did vote to give us the referendum. We then had a referendum. We gave them an instruction. Now they're saying, do you know what? We really don't know what to do with this instruction. Can you please decide again? It just doesn't make them look very competent to actually not be able to implement something that they said that they could. Because as Stig was saying, interestingly, last time, they never made it clear to us, the politicians who said, OK, yeah, fine, we could do this. They never at any stage said, actually, these are the limitations that we're working around, so this is what we can do. Nobody's actually been very honest with us. We just keep hearing various reiterations of what all of these people seem to think is the interpretation of Brexit, and they seem to want to foist it on
And
us.
that's not just before the referendum, although it's par excellence before the referendum is all made up and nonsensical. These bunch voted to trigger Article 50. So they said in really relatively recent terms, we are moving out of the EU, we think we can get this done in 2 years, and en masse they voted out. So to then say, well, but politics is the art of the possible. They're now saying this is impossible. Brexit, as advertised, is impossible. And maybe if enough of the Leaver people in Parliament, the hardcore ERG, had the intellectual honesty to say that Brexit that was offered to the people, it's not the fault of the people who voted for it, it was never deliverable. And it's been demonstrated it's not deliverable because it's not being delivered.
I don't think Dia will agree with that. That's the Times reporting Hammond's thoughts, by the way. To the Metro now, a bit of a generic one, I guess. Rebuttal on Brexit again, the fastest headline they could get out when we had the floor.
No, it's a joke on bottoms.
Oh, it's a joke on bottoms. Right, of course it is.
The best jokes you have to explain.
I don't think it's a particularly good joke, and I think you've demonstrated in some ways that it's not
Honestly,
especially good.
it was so small I couldn't make out their
It's the
derrieres.
button
That was the
rebuttal.
problem.
Yes, the button rebuttal.
Okay, right. Got it.
Can I just this bugs the hell out of me. I want to say, I know this is not helpful. This is not about whether Brexit is a good thing or anything. The opportunity cost of Brexit we should reflect on tonight as we stand outside Parliament. This is yet another day in which the British Parliament has dithered and dallied and done nothing. So not only has it not fixed Brexit, it has spent another day not fixing everything else in this country. And when the history of this is looked back upon, when you have a period of 5, 10, 30, 100 years, there'll be seen to be this litany of problems facing a country, a modern country, facing all modern countries, and there'll be all of this time, effort, blood, sweat and tears wasted on this, where they can't even get a conclusion to it.
But you say that as somebody who doesn't necessarily support the major project, which is Brexit,
I
like the Daily Express
actually don't think that actually matters, because whether you think Brexit's a good idea or not, what we have also seen is negligence of government on a grand, almost impossibly grand scale.
Okay. To the Daily Express very quickly then, we voted for Brexit. All you say is no. MPs fell again with just 10 days to deadline. And in the last few seconds, let's just show you the Sun front page as well as we conclude, which is obviously about Sir Mick Jagger. Let's mend the night together, they said, a pun on one of their most famous songs.
Do you two want to start
obviously.
singing?
No, I'm not going to.
You were
At
singing
this stage.
Fernando by ABBA.
I was not. That was Dia.
I think you both. I think that's
We're running out of
outrageous.
time. All we've got time for. Stig, Dia, thank you.
Thank you for
See
the
soon.
music.